Hello, Built by Us listeners. Before we begin, we like to preface all of our episodes by sharing that our conversations take place with individuals of different lived experiences and at varying stages in their journey of learning and unlearning. Because of this, our conversations can be sensitive and triggering. Here at Built by Us, we want to remind listeners that we will always strive to create brave spaces where productive dialogue is present, all voices are heard and acknowledged, and learning can take place for each guest, listener, and host. Conversations and thoughts from our episodes are not officially representative of the views of Democracy North Carolina. We hope that you enjoy the episode.
What does resistance actually look like? Sometimes it's a chant that echoes through marble halls. Sometimes it's organizers in the front of the row who stand up when everyone else sits down. And sometimes they're yelling things that people may or may not agree with. This week on Built by Us, we're bringing you two voices from the front lines of North Carolina's democracy fight. First, you'll hear from Mark Swallow. You probably notice him or remember him from being in that video.
Racist reps! Racist maps! Racist reps!
Off of our Instagram, he leads Democracy Out Loud's legislative response team. Mark was sitting in the front row. When the Senate committee advanced the gerrymandered map, he and his team stood up and made sure the world heard them, and they were escorted out the building. The video went viral, and the fight was just beginning, and I thought it was a great time to bring him on to the podcast to talk about what was going through his mind when him and his fellow organizers were escorted out. After that, we'll hear from Karen Ziegler, the lead organizer of Democracy Out Loud, a grassroots activist community that has been organizing for fair democracy since 2017. Karen testified before the legislature with a message that cut through the noise. If you pass this, your legacy will be shredding the Constitution, destroying democracy. She spent 8 years building peaceful, persistent power in North Carolina, and she's not backing down now. This is a story about CD1. And most of all, is about what democracy looks like when it's fought for. Welcome to Built by Us.
Welcome.
You're listening to Built by Us.
Built by Us.
Built by Us.
Built by Us.
Sweet. So we're here, Mark. So thanks for joining me, Mark. If you could, take us back to that moment in the North Carolina legislature where you and your team stood up and chanted, "Racist maps make racist reps." And if you could just walk us through what happened, what was like going through your mind?
Yeah, so we've been working at the legislature all year, with Democracy Out Loud legislative response team. We've been going down to the committee meetings. We've been speaking, and almost all the time, the Republican reps are going to do what they're going to do. And they stack these committees with Republicans, so the Democrats are completely overwhelmed from a numbers perspective. So they're going to be able to do what they're going to do. And we knew that that's what was going to happen in the Senate committee meeting. So we decided that, yes, they were going to give us a couple minutes to speak, but we knew they were going to do what they were going to do. So we need to make our voice heard in another way. And the only option they left us was to make noise from the gallery. And so that's what we decided to do. And the chant had different variations. We were trying to figure out exactly what we wanted to do and how we wanted to say it. But we figured, 5 words would be effective. We know we needed to say racist because that's exactly what these maps are. And we came up with racist maps, racist reps. And, this whole the resistance is about making sure that Donald Trump gets another representative from North Carolina in the U.S. House. So making racist reps seem very fitting. So that's how we came up with that. And when we started chanting, I would say it was really cool that, the legislative response team probably had about 15 members there, but the whole gallery of about 50 people joined us and spoke up with us, and we all got kicked out. We'd been kicked out before, but it feels good when that happens. If you go to legislation and you sit there in these galleries and you listen to these committee meetings and what's being spouted, and then you leave there, you feel like you need a shower. I mean, it's just you just feel dirty, right? And when you can make this type of noise and get tossed out, it's your voice and it's your chance to speak truth to power. And we took advantage of it, and that always feels good.
I think you touched on something really important is when you guys were thinking about the words, you guys were trying to be effective. And I think when you're looking at organizing, you're always asking yourself, how can I be the most effective in this moment with this amount of resources I have? It's about leverage, action, and power. How much of this movement was premeditated, knowing that the NCGA was in a position to start to create some of these maps?
Yeah, well, we knew we were going to attend. We didn't know exactly how many people would be able to show up. We really didn't plan out exactly what we were going to say. We didn't divide up this and you're going to talk about that. But I think we each came at this at a different angle, and I think it was very effective. What we were saying about this redistricting from all kinds of different perspectives, and then the other members that were in the gallery, stood up and said their perspective, and I think it was very effective how the different angles that we came at. So it was fairly spontaneous. Now the chant we knew we were going to say, and we had distributed that right before we went in. So people knew what we were going to chant. There was really no surprise there. But the timing of it and they want to kick that off and have an impact right before they called for the vote, I think was very important.
A spontaneous spark that led to a very viral moment. Both in, and I don't know if you've read any of the comments, Mark, both in support and in not support. And that is your First Amendment right of free speech. For the people around North Carolina and outside North Carolina who saw you guys taking a stand and seeing some people hop online and support you in kind of the social media fashion of reposting and sharing the video and echoing the thing that I would say roughly it was maybe about 20 of you, that 20 people could get 2 million views across Instagram. But I think that's a larger number that shows the impact and showing how much of a microscope that moment was for across North Carolina. What did that mean to everybody there that was a part of that moment to see the reshares and people commenting and sharing this and speaking out either for or against what you guys were standing for?
Yeah, it's heartening in that other people are realizing the danger that we're facing. And that kind of leads to why we formed a legislative response team. But the purpose of the legislative response team was to make sure that our voice was being heard in the North Carolina legislature. And Democracy Out Loud, even though we're kind of statewide, we're focused on in the triangle. And so we have the opportunity to attend these committee meetings that many people across North Carolina do not. And they do not get a chance to voice their opinion. They talked about being able to comment on these redistricting plans. And they opened up these comments, they never looked at them. It was really clear they never looked at that input. And so people were writing these comments and not having a chance to get that voice out. So we kind of felt like we were being the voice for North Carolina. And it was encouraging to see the responses that we did get that showed that people appreciated and understood what we were trying to say. So I think that's very important.
Yeah. When you were talking about the maps and people not being able to come speak out against it, because a lot of people don't realize a lot of the processes that go on are during their workday, because for these legislature, that is their job. But for you to come speak and for anybody to come speak, they almost have to have the bandwidth in their workday, their 9 to 5 workday, to come speak. For people that weren't able to come to hear about these maps or see these maps, what do these maps mean for the democratic process moving forward?
Well, I think obviously it crushes the democratic process. When you rig the system or you cheat the system, which is really what redistricting does, then it disempowers people and it empowers the wrong people. And so it's obviously impactful to the democratic process because that is about fair elections, free and fair elections. And in order to get free and fair elections, you have to have free and fair district plans. and to be represented by the people that the people would like to have represent them, and not the other way around. Representatives are picking their people versus the people picking the representatives, and that's just not that's wrong for democracy.
Yeah. You're completely right. It is not right for the democratic process. I saw a stat that they're trying to take the district that is 40% black and drop it to 32% black voting population, which is destroying the state's opportunity district for black voters. What does that mean for the democratic process when you start to look at fair representation for all people?
Yeah, so they're attempting with this redistricting to take away a black voice in the U.S. House from North Carolina, specifically Don Davis in this case, but it really would be anybody that District 1 wanted to elect. And so they're attempting to mute that voice and overwhelm it with a counter voice that is not representative of that population. And that is counter to democracy. And so by them gerrymandering District 1 and really basically District 3, that's how they're trying to do this work, is trying to balance out the two districts so that one overwhelms the other. They are muting voices that really, just makes people feel like their voice is not being heard, and therefore their votes don't count. And if they feel that way, they're not going to go to the polls. I think what's really important, though, and Senator Hayes made this point when he showed these maps, he's basing this on the votes that Donald Trump got in those districts. I think that's a challenge. I think that may be the flaw in this plan, the Republican Party in North Carolina. Trump I think it's becoming more clear to people that he's a very problematic person. Project 2025 is problematic for your basic person, basic people, right? And all those promises that he was going to help the working class is bullcrap. And I think people are beginning to see that. So there may be some danger there for the Republican Party in this exercise. But nevertheless, it just should not be happening. This redistricting, gerrymandering should not be happening.
So it should definitely not be happening at all. Speaking of Senator Hayes, he claimed that he drew this map himself in 3 days without using any racial data. What is your response to that? Just kind of, I guess, just blindly drawing a new map,
Well, so the fact that he didn't use racial data is irrelevant, because he started with a district that was that has a certain racial representation. So that's baked in. Race is baked in to the district he picked. And by diluting that, he is affecting race. He's trying to dilute the black vote and between District 1 and District 3. That, by definition, is baked into what he did. So whether he did it himself and it took 3 days, I have no idea, but it's irrelevant, in my opinion. Race was baked into his choice of picking District 1, and it doesn't matter whether you added it or not, it was already there. It's kind of irrelevant.
Let's take a step back, Mark, for just a quick moment. How did you get this heavily involved in organizing and in work? You're not just on the team, but you've been described as a leader for this response, or at least of this most recent one. What brought you into this work? Was there like a certain piece of civic engagement maybe you saw as a child, or maybe it's something you've realized as you've gotten older and seen more things across life?
Yeah, so I don't need to go back that far. I think what really motivated us to start the legislative response team was the results of the November election last year and how despondent I felt about that. I couldn't believe that people in America, United States, would put this man back in power. It was beyond my belief. And so there was that. And then we had Senate Bill 382 last year that started out as a dentist bill, right? And they ripped the guts out and they put in legislation claiming it was a hurricane relief bill, which it was not. There was no money appropriated. Not a nickel was going to get to anybody. And then they shoved in these election law changes that moved the state board of elections from the governor to the auditor, greatly curtailed the ability of county board of elections to resolve issues with ballots, amongst other things. So when that got jammed through, because the House and Senate had their supermajority last year, and so they were under the gun to get this passed before the new year. We were in the gallery, and we had kind of been told to be quiet because there were Republicans that potentially were going to vote this thing down. That was what we were told and what we were kind of led to believe. I didn't believe that for a second. I don't think Moore would have brought this to the House floor if he had not had the votes. So we sat there and were quiet, and then they passed this thing and over the vetoes. And to me, I just sat there kind of stunned that we had been quiet. And at that point, I decided I was not going to be quiet again. I had it, and I was going to fight for my democracy. And so Karen Ziegler, who kind of leads the Democracy Out Loud team, and I got together, and we decided we were going to form this legislative response team that's going to get heavily engaged at the local level, because we don't have a lot of power at the federal level, but we certainly have something we can do at the North Carolina level. And because we're so close to Capitol, we can engage. And so that's what we started to do. We started attending committee meetings, started out with just a few people. If we had one or two people speak at committees, that was a good day. We're now up to 85 people in legislative response team. We had, a dozen people speaking against the redistricting plan. So we have grown, and not only from numbers, but skill. And I wanted to get to the next level in 2026. So we've been working our way upstream, right? We started out with the galleries at the session levels. We've gone to committee meetings. Now I want to go and talk to sponsors of these bills, put our fact sheets together, try and meet with the sponsors, and have our say with the sponsors. And then we'll continue to be represented at the committee meetings and et cetera. So, I think there's more things that we can do. So that's what really initiated the legislative response team. And I think that's where what we're trying to do is make sure that we're speaking our truth through the power.
Mark, I think you pointed out something very beautiful there, speaking your truth in your day-to-day life and your day-to-day actions. That's whether you're an organizer or not. And then also too, for any listeners that may be chiming in, I think another thing that you're doing that's impactful, Mark, is what people probably don't know. Because we are a purple state, a lot of legislature gets tested in North Carolina before it goes out and is implemented across other states. They look at the effects of how bills do in North Carolina and the effects of them. And a lot of times it becomes a battle. It becomes the testing ground, even sometimes for the federal level. So even the work you're doing now, standing up and speaking your truth against bills that you may see wrong, can also affect people on a national and federal level. So I appreciate you doing that and speaking your truth.
Yeah, and what we did this year is we looked at all 1,800 bills that were submitted between the House and the Senate, and we initially had a list of about 77 that spanned all kinds of things from gun control, reduce or eliminating concealed weapon permits, and eliminating DEI. So there's just a wealth of items there. And then what survived crossover, and there were about 28 bills that survived crossover. So then we focused on those bills because those are the ones that could become law. And we've been working on trying to make sure that we sustain Governor Stein's vetoes, because we have some Democrats in the House that are a little shaky, and trying to make sure that they keep strong and united and sustain those vetoes. So far, from the DEI ones and a few others, we've been successful. Not so much on some others. So there's still plenty of work to do. And if your listeners want to get engaged, we'd love to have them. I think I've looked at why Donald Trump got reelected, and I think it boils down to, in my opinion, people don't see how they can achieve the American dream anymore, right? And I don't think the American dream is, I want to be a billionaire. I think that the American dream is, I want to have a job that's going to allow me to take care of my family, have a roof over our head, food on the table, right? Maybe a car in a driveway, go on vacation once in a while. I don't think that's ridiculous. And I think that's what we really need to be focusing on. And I think both parties are missing that aspect. We're drilling on Medicaid and we're drilling on SNAP, and that's those are really important programs, but we haven't because we don't have a living wage as a minimum wage, right? I mean, there's root causes to these things that we're not really talking about, although maybe Bernie Sanders might be. But we're not really digging into these things, to some of these things that could fix this. I don't think corporate rate has. I should not be paying more taxes than any corporation in America. That's outrageous. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done there that we need to start with at the local level.
It starts definitely at the local level. And speaking of the local level, as we're recording this the day after the ending of your local elections. And I don't know if you have been tracking in your local area the civic participation, but how are people around you, Mark, in your community being engaged with the local municipal elections that have just finished? And what did you think about the North Carolina municipalities this year in terms of civic engagement?
Yeah, so municipal election years tend to be kind of light turnouts, but I think we saw some counter to that. Kerry had a Democratic sweep, basically, and it had pretty good turnout. Now, I full disclosure, I am a poll worker for the Wake County Board of Elections, so I was a chief judge yesterday, um, and have been training poll workers for early voting. So I'm kind of engaged at that level. Um, and, and and part of my role is, part of why I do that is I just want to watch things from the inside, but there are also people that can watch it from the outside, and we should be helping each other try to make sure that things don't go awry in the democratic process. So I think there's work, but to answer your question, I don't really know all the turnouts, but the results were pretty interesting across the state, actually across the country. And so, think there's hope. I'm really worried about 2028. I'm worried about what this administration may do to 2028, maybe even 2026. So we're going to have to watch it really closely. And that's going to take all of us. And it's going to take all of us engaging at the local level for our state legislatures.
Yep, it's going to take all of us. We always say democracy in small steps lead to a big change.
Yeah, and I heard something this weekend that I liked. It's called push. Protest until you see something happen. Push until something happens. Yeah, protest until something happens.
Yep, you were definitely right on that, Mark. When it comes to hopefully, I hope by 2028 or even 2027, 2030, 2050, I hope in my lifetime we can see the balance being restored to the democratic process where people can truly have a fair say in who they see in office and make sure that their voice is represented. Um, when it comes to restoring the balance in the democratic process, what do you think that looks like in practice? What do you think a win in that arena would look like? Because right now, I think a lot of people would describe democracy as being unstable or or extremely at risk with the state of North Carolina, actually on all three levels.
Yeah, I think what makes me nervous is our democracy was based and it's assumed that a check and balance system will keep it whole. And what we're seeing today is that check and balance system has failed or is failing. And that's a problem. And that can be a problem. It's a problem at the state level too, right? Our judiciary, Supreme Court is right along there with the legislature. And of course, we have a very weak governor. Not that Governor Stein's wrong; he just doesn't have any power. Um, I think that is very problematic. And so until we can get that balance reestablished, we have great risk, and that's at the state level as well as the federal level. What's it going to take to do that? Well, as I understand it, the Dems have a plan at the state level. We're trying to retake the Supreme Court, but it's going to take a lot of work to get it there. And that I'm a little nervous about relying on the courts to fix things. But I think it's a start. I think there was legislation that got derailed at the federal level that would have handled some of this gerrymandering issues that didn't get passed. Thank you, Joe Manchin. But I think so I bet there's work at all the levels to try and reestablish those check and balances, and I think that starts with ending gerrymandering.
Yep, the war on gerrymandering has to end. There's no way we can be a part of the democratic process if from the beginning the playing field isn't level. When you start to again think about the future, and also the work you do in and out your community, what keeps your fire going to show up every day, to show up to the polls, to lead this legislation response team, to listen to people in your community when it comes to making some of these fact sheets and really presenting this data to a legislature before they pass this bill or law? What keeps that fire going for you, Mark?
My love for my country, in all honesty. I really feel that there's a promise in America that we've not lived up to, but we can. And I really think that we need to continue to fight for that. It's been a struggle the whole 250 years. It's not going to get fixed next year or the year after. It's going to be a continual struggle, and um, and we can do it, but it's going to take work. It's going to take work from all of us. So it can't just be you or me. It's got to be all of us doing our thing for whatever we have the time and energy and ability to do.
Yep, it's going to take all of us. For people listening, Mark, how can they get involved with you and Karen's work? Is there somewhere where they can go sign up to volunteer, to get emails? Feel free to let any of the listeners know where they can go.
Yeah, so you can send an email to democracyoutloud, one word, @gmail.com and say, I'm interested in knowing more about the legislative response team. That'll get routed to me, and I will make sure that you get the information that they want, and they can decide how engaged they want to be. We do put out, when the legislature is in session, we put out we have weekly information that goes out. We meet on a weekly basis via Zoom, so you don't need to be local on Mondays. And then we lay out the game plan for what's going on in the legislative complex for that week. And we try and share the information. We do have information and some Google Docs on the bills that we're following and status. So we have links to those that can be available. So there's that type of information. We do have a Signal thread that you can get access to as well for some privacy. And so we can get access, have people have access to that. So that's how you can get involved with us. Democracy Out Loud, if you're interested in Democracy Out Loud itself, you can go to democracyoutloud.org and see our webpage, and you can sign up for the newsletter there, as well as get engaged with our meetings that we meet on Tuesday at around lunchtime. So, and democracy, by the way, I should say, Democracy Out Loud's been in existence going almost 9 years now. It started out as Tuesday with Tillis, back when Tillis got elected the first time, and we knew that things weren't going to go well between Tillis and Donald Trump 1.0. Little did we know how bad it would continue to get. And we decided that we really didn't want to be associated with Tom Tillis anymore, so we changed our name to Democracy Out Loud, because we want to be loud for democracy. And so that's what we're doing.
Sweet. And our final question, Mark, in this trying time, and I know we're looking at something a bit different, especially coming after the municipals. What gives you hope right now? Is there something that you've recently seen is there something that you maybe have recently seen that reminds you like why this work matters so much and like who it is truly impacting?
What gives me a lot of hope is, when things we do at the legislature goes viral, that's an awesome experience. Um, when we get the turnout and the results that we had in the municipal elections yesterday, that gives me hope. That we get people to, the No Kings rallies give me amazing hope. We get thousands of people, millions countrywide stepping up. Um, that all gives me hope. And so, we need to make noise, and we need to be a thorn, and we need to do it all peacefully, right? I'm not advocating any sort of violence here. But yeah, we need to make sure that we speak our truth to power. And it's empowering when you do that. When you have your say, even though they might be ignored, you've had your say. If you don't say anything, the lie lingers, and there's nothing to counter it, right? And you have your say, there's a truth out there now, and there's a counter to that lie. And it's very important to get that out there. Otherwise, the lie persists. And there's this belief that the more times you say the lie, it becomes truth. It does not. It just makes you a liar. And that's what we need to call out, right? The lie is a lie. Here's the truth. We need to make sure that we continue to do that.
Yeah, speaking your truth is something that we really hold really to our values at Democracy NC. But I think, again, to even echo what you said earlier, of protest until something changes. Like, that is definitely a big takeaway for me today, and I hope that's a big takeaway for any of our listeners. There is...
And I didn't coin that, by the way. I have to give credit to Reverend Barber over the weekend at Wilson. So I don't want to take. Exactly.
But I appreciate you so much, Mark, for joining us today. And again, if you are looking to get involved in any of Democracy's Out Loud work, you can email Mark. The email will be in our link in our description. And you can also check out Democracy Out Loud's website. It was democracyoutloud.org or .com, Mark?
.org, I think, yeah.
democracyoutloud.org. Thanks for listening to Built by Us. This is a 2-part episode. Be on the lookout for the next episode to drop next week, or the episode may be available now. Hit next to see if the episode is available. Thanks for listening to Built by Us.